Today we're going to talk about how to factor polynomials that are more specifically trinomials in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. We've learned how to now factor them when we have a greatest common factor, meaning that we have a factor in all of the terms of the polynomial that we're looking at. But what if there isn't a greatest common factor? That doesn't mean we still can't continue to try to solve the problem, and it certainly doesn't mean that there isn't other ways to get there. So to factor trinomials in this form, here's the steps. First, we make a list of the factor pairs of the C term. So notice this last term at the end. Remember, factor pairs would be things like 3 and 2 would be a factor pair of 6. Negative 3 and negative 2 would also be a factor pair of 6. Pairs of factors that when they're multiplied together get me that C value at the end. For step 2, using these pairs, we want to be thinking, how can I add these numbers, the pairs, to get the B term? So the B term is right here in front of the x, it's the coefficient of the x. So what I want to do is I want to find factor pairs of the C that will add together, and it's always add, to get the B value. Step 3 says use the double bubble method. Well, basically the double bubble, if we consider that a bubble, that would be 2 of them, or the double bubble. We're going to use that method to write 2 binomials to plug the pair in. And as we have said almost every single lesson this year, we always check. And in this case, because we're multiplying 2 binomials, we're basically checking with FOIL. We always want to make sure that our 2 binomials would go back together to get what we started from so that we know we have the right answer. So let's just see how some of these work. So here we have a polynomial, x squared plus 10x plus 16. So step 1. Step 1 says, let's find the factor pairs of C. Well, my C term is the 16. So let's think about the 16. How can I make 16s? Well, we can certainly do 1 times 16. We could do negative 1 times negative 16. That would get me a 16. I can do 2 times 8. And I can do 4 times 4. And obviously I could do negative 2 times negative 8 and negative 4 times negative 4. So that's step 1. Those are my factor pairs of the C value, or 16. Now, for the second part, I want to do the sum of those pairs to get the B value. Now again, the B value is the 10. So if I just add my pairs, 1 plus 16 is 17. No. Negative 1 plus negative 16 is negative 17. No. 2 plus 8 is 10. So that's going to work. And then these other ones, 8, negative 10, negative 8. The only one that gives me the 10 that we need is right here. That's step 2. So now step 3 says to use our double bubble. So double bubble, there's the first parentheses, there's the second. We're dealing with x's, so I'm going to plug x's in the front. And we're using the 2 and the 8. Positive 2, positive 8. I believe that is the polynomial factored. So we want to check it, we want to make sure. And this is where I would use my FOIL method, and I would do x times x is x squared. X times 8 is plus 8x. 2 plus x is 2x. 2 times 8 is your 16. And obviously these two middle terms would go back together to get 10x plus 16. So it definitely checks. So to say the factor of that trinomial, you have x plus 2 times x plus 8. Now some of the things that you want to start noticing here, and we want to immediately start it right away. I didn't really need all of these. There's some things that I want you to start looking at. So when I start looking at my factor pairs, because it's a positive number over here, they're either both positives or both negatives. Now because my b term, the 10, is a positive, in reality I didn't need to do the negatives because they're going to add up to be a negative. The negatives are negative. The negatives are negative. So I don't really need to do every single pair. And ideally, the better you get at this, you'll start trimming down what actual pairs you use. So let's try the next one. So here we have a 12 is our C value. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make the pairs for C. Remember, C is a 12 and it's a positive 12. Now notice though my B value is a negative 8. So notice the negative 8. So that basically means this time I don't really want 4 and 3 and 6 and 2. I only want negatives. So when I start looking at my factor pairs, negative 1 and negative 12 would be 1, negative 2 and negative 6, negative 3, negative 4. Again, we wouldn't want the positives because once I find the sum, I need to find a negative 8. Well, when I add these together, I get negative 13, I get negative 8, which is what we're looking for, and then just to verify, negative 7. So here is the pair that we want. So again, I use my double bubble, and I'm using x's, and this time I see a negative 2 and a negative 6. And again, I can use my FOIL to kind of check it. X times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x, plus negative 2 times x is negative 2x. That makes negative 8x. Negative 2 times negative 6 is 12. So let's kind of move down a little bit. Got a little bit more to go. So here on this next one. So now I'm trying to make factor pairs of 4, and I'm just doing PRS and sum. The sum is for my B value, and this is from my C value. And again, the C value is a 3. Now again, because we have a positive C value, they're both going to be positive signs or negative signs, but the B value is a negative, so that would tell me I really only want the negatives. And if I think about my factor pairs of 3, I really only have negative 1 times negative 3. When I add those two together, it does confirm, so that I can say, yep, that one will get me that B value. There are going to be ones that we will say we can't factor, and then we'll show you some other ways to get to the solutions. In this case, we can. So W's in the front, W's in the front, negative 1, negative 3. Again, I use my FOIL to verify that it checks. And here's the last one. So this is where you really have to start kind of thinking how this works. So I have my pairs, I have my sum. Now I'm looking at a negative here, negative 21. So to make a negative 21, this time I have to have one positive and one negative. So this time I really kind of have to do out some of this. I'm still keeping in mind a negative 4 is the B value. So negative 21. So 1 times negative 21. Negative 1 times positive 21. 3 times negative 7. And negative 3 times positive 7. When I add these across, first I get 1 plus negative 21 is negative 20. Negative 1 plus 21 is positive 20. 3 plus negative 7 is negative 4. Negative 3 plus 7 is positive 4. And again, we're looking for the negative 4. So when I make my double bubble, I get n plus 3 minus 7. So here we have another example here of a real-life problem. We have a farmer who's planting a rectangular pumpkin patch in the northeast corner of a square plot of land. So again, square is going to be an important part here. The area of the pumpkin patch is 600 square meters. What is the area of the square lot? Okay, so we're dealing with area. So we know area is side squared or length times width. So we know the area in total is 600. So now I want to look at my diagram a little bit. So based on the diagram that I am seeing, let me just focus first on the upper part. So up here in this upper part, this side is 440. Down here we have S. Okay, so that's our variable. So what I want to focus on here is what is this little piece? This is the pumpkin patch we're talking about. This is the entire lot of land that they own. So if I just focus in on here, this piece right here has to be S minus the 40 on the other part. So that's just this little piece there. Then I want to look at the side over here. If I look at the up and down side and I just look at the pumpkin patch side, again it's an S. This time it has to be minus 30. So whatever the full side is, if I subtract 30, I'll know what that is. Those two are the important parts here. Because what I need to do when I look at my area formula, I'm going to do S minus 30 times S minus 40. And that's now going to give me the binomials. So to be able to solve this, this is where we need to do some extra work. So to be able to factor this type to help me find what S is by itself, what I need to do is first use my FOIL. So the first step here is I'm going to bring down the 600 because we're not doing that for a little bit. When I use FOIL, I get S squared minus 40S minus 30S plus 1200. I can simplify a little bit more here. I get S squared minus 70S plus 1200. Now, to use our zero product property to be able to factor this, what I need to do is make the left-hand side a 0. So my next move here is to bring the 600 over to the right. And what that's going to do is create the 0 that we need. On the other side, I'm going to combine my like terms, and I get plus 600. So now at this point, what I want to do is actually factor again. I got to figure out how do I get this thing factor. So what I want to do is, again, think about my factor pairs of the C that get a sum that's a B. And I'm thinking about the number 600. So 600 is a much bigger number than the ones we first dealt with. There are a lot of factor pairs. So what you want to start doing now is looking at how can I use what I know from the C value and the B value to try to start getting closer to my answer without having to write every single factor pair. Well, because it's a positive C value, I know my answers are both plus or minus, positives or negatives. Because it's a negative B value, I know that all of my factor pairs are going to be both negatives. So again, I just trimmed out half of my factor pairs. Then I want to start thinking, well, if I do negative 1 and negative 600, and I add that, not even close to 70. If I was to do 50 and 12, It's closer, but it's not going to get me there. If I was to do 25 and 24, it's not going to get me there. So I certainly have a whole bunch of pairs that I can certainly try, and some trial and error. So let's just kind of say we mentioned 50 and negative 12. That gave me negative 62. Well, close. We mentioned the 25. 25. And what did I say? 25 was with 25 and 24. If I add those together, I get negative 49. No. Then we talk about like a negative 30 and a negative 20. Added together gives me 50. No. But some of you probably are already seeing it, and that's a good thing. If I was to do negative 20 and negative 30, and we just did that one, we just did it in reverse order, that would also give me negative 50. But if I do negative 10 and negative 60, there is the pair that we're looking for. And again, some of these are not going to come as easy as others, but that is the pair. So now I come over here and I create my double bubble. S minus 10, S minus 60. So what that's going to tell me is, if I use my now zero product property and set those both to 0, I get S equals 10, S equals 60. So we think we have two answers here, but wait a minute. If I was to say S was 10, let's think about that for a minute. Would that make any sense? If S was 10, meaning this whole side was 10, could this be 30? The answer is no. We've already gone past 10 on this little bit here. The same thing here. I've already gone past 10, so this side certainly can't be 10. So when that happens, there are times that we're going to throw out a solution. They call this extraneous solution. Basically, it doesn't make any sense. It is a solution to the equation. It is a solution to the polynomial equation, but it doesn't make any sense to this problem. So we're only going to take the 60. Now, the 60 is actually not the answer, because the question actually says, what is the area of the square plot of land? Well, the square plot of land, if I go to my area formula, is S squared. Well, if we think that it's 60, that would make my answer 3,600, and we are in meters squared. So several steps on this one. It's not as easy to factor this one, but we have to first get everything to one side to make it equal to 0. Then we can use our zero product property. We can try to use our factoring, because it was in the x squared plus bx plus c form, and that's how we get the answer of 3,600 meters squared. So here on the back, there's several examples. I'm going to actually have you pause the video, and then you're going to try these on your own, and then we'll come back and check them within a second. So pause the video, try the problems, and then come back and check the first three. So there are the answers for the first three, A, B, and C. Focusing on the first one for A, we're trying to find factor pairs that make a negative 15. So I first focus here on 5, negative 3, and negative 5, 3. When I do my sum, I need to get a positive 2. So 5, negative 3 would go into the bubble on the second one. Again, because I have a positive 30, I know that I need both positives or both negatives, but because the B value is positive, I'm going to focus on the only negative pairs. Obviously, 1 and 30 I could have used, chose to use just the 215, 6, 5, and 310 until I found this 13. And then the 10 and the 3 can go in. And again, please check to make sure with your foil. The last one, again, we have a negative 20, which means one of my factors is positive and one of my factors is negative. Because I have a negative 1, remember there's a 1 in front of that V, I just want to make sure I'm signing the sum of the negative 1. So I just started with negative 2, 10, 2, negative 10, 4, negative 5, and negative 4, 5. And again, once I did the sums, I found that the 4 and negative 5 was the correct pair, and I plugged in the double bubble. So try the next three after you pause the video, and then you can come back on and see how you did. So here you have the answers here. So let's talk about a couple of these quickly here. So again, the negative 12 for my c value tells me that one is positive and one is negative. Then I want to start looking at 2, negative 6, negative 2, 6, 3, negative 4, negative 3, positive 4, and then I add them across. And when I add them across, I'm looking for the negative 1 for my b value. So this is the pair I'm going to use, so z plus 3, z minus 4. In the second one, again, a negative 26 means one is positive, one is negative. 26 actually does not have that many factor pairs to look at, but once I plug them in, I'm looking for the sum to be a negative 11. So 2 plus negative 3 is negative 11. So the 2 and the negative 13 go in. On the last one, negative 40 actually does have quite a few that you can work on. So you want to start trying to help yourself with a little bit of strategy on this. One is positive and one is negative, and then I need to get a difference basically of a negative 3. So I tried the negative 4 and 10 and got a 6. Then I tried the 4 and negative 10 and got a negative 6. 5 and negative 8 gave me the negative 3 we needed. So then it's x plus 5, x minus 8. So factoring is going to be critical to your success in algebra and going forward into your high school math. It is very important that we understand how to do this section especially so that we can move on, because right now we've been working on how to factor things that are x squared plus bx plus c, where this number out in front here is a 1. We call that the a value. What we're going to be talking about in the next section is how do I do something when the a value in the front is now not a 1. It gets a little more complicated, it's a little more of a challenge, but it's something that we can handle once we understand how this works and we can understand the idea of factoring into two binomials.